Greetings, ladies and metal-gents, and welcome to this latest edition of Tales from Outer Space, where I take stories from across the internet and read them for your entertainment. This particular story is called How Humanity Fell, written by a teller of tall tales. Humans were always an odd species. Their love of overkill is constantly overshadowed by their kindness and generosity. These soft-skinned bipeds always contradicted themselves like that. There was often a saying that I'd heard amongst the more philosophical members of the educational institution I attended. When the world ends, it'll not be with a cataclysmic bang, but a fearful whimper. This phrase is one I understood instinctually. It was a fact, really. When your planet is dying or slaughtered for execution, what is there to do but beg for mercy? Then the years came when humanity showed us the third, heartbreaking way their world could end. Earth, like all homeworlds, was almost entirely devoted to their various cultures and ways of life. A living museum of sorts, where they lived like ages long past for the preservation of history. Other than a small planetary garrison and reserve fleet, it was largely undefended. The Carnids took advantage of this. None knew how the Carnid bioship had slipped past the front lines, but it had. It crashed onto the humans' home planet along the west coast of North America, in a state known as Oregon, per the historical index. With the university stationed in the state of Massachusetts, we were originally told that we were safe, that the garrison on the west coast could handle it. Then the reports began coming in from the Ochocho front. These Carnids were not the same ones they had fought almost 1,000 years ago. They'd been modified to be bigger, stronger, with thicker armor and redundant organ systems. They could reproduce in the middle of combat, sending swarms of screeching young into the trenches without a care in the world. The Ochocho front fell within weeks, and the young men and women who gave their lives were heralded as heroes, their sacrifice spurring a global call to arms. There was a young man in my class named Hans Lugner, a small, mousy man with thick glasses. He signed up for the war effort immediately after finding out his brother had been killed on the Ochocho front. He was sent to the planet in Alpha Centauri system to help with the refugee evacuation. I remember when I first saw the footage, shot from the tail camera of an evacuation shuttle. How, even with fist-sized holes in the chest plate of his armor, he still rose against the nigh godlike Chosen to smack them down with his broken rifle. He died then, throat gashed open by the Chosen's war gauntlet. But even as he lay dying, the camera zoomed in on the young man as he seemed to stare back with a smile. It was then that I got a slight inkling as to how humanity would fall. The war against the Imperial Union, as they had been calling themselves, showed many battles like this, and even as the Carnids rampaged through the Northwest America and into the South, humanity never gave up. Each kilometer and mile was flooded with the blood of humanity's warriors. They, who held the line in staunch defiance, would break their fists against the hardened carapace of the Carnids before allowing them another inch. But for every warrior who gave their lives, there was a mother hugging her children to her so that they didn't have to watch the evacuation outposts be overrun as they flew to safety. Siblings reunited at the last second thanks to warriors who put their own lives below those that they were there to rescue. Families who remained whole, friends who didn't have to bury their chosen blood. Each warrior gave their life in exchange for the life of a dozen innocents, or more. For the miles of the battlefield was soaked in the blood of warriors, every drop of innocent blood diluted by the fiery liquid iron that filled the warriors' veins. But the miles of blood-soaked land kept growing, and the warriors were running out. I still remember the day General Craig Tolman arrived at the university, a reserved man, abrupt and callous he seemed, as he informed us that the Carnids were on their way here, and that Earth had been considered a loss because the Carnids were reproducing and spreading too fast. I remember asking him, "Then what are we going to do?" I remember the way he looked at me in the eyes then, stern but determined. "Me and our 501st have 24 hours. If by that time this entire area isn't evacuated, we have failed our mission." I hadn't been able to respond. How could they be concerned about evacuation? This was their history, their home, and they were just going to give it up. Sadly, that is exactly what they were going to do. But we were the last living souls on the planet, except for wildlife. The sound of gunfire started early in the morning. The many bodies gathered in the main courtyard flinched at the sudden cacophony. General Crick stood there with us, watching the sky and defending a barricade that guarded the main doors to the courtyard. A man with a large backpack stood next to him, a wire leading to a handheld earpiece and a microphone as he shouted orders to organize defense lines. I could hear the many voices on the other side of the strange earpiece, how they shouted back affirmatives and information even as the roar of gunfire tried to drown them out. It wasn't long then that we heard the heavy thump of artillery fire and the crackling rumble of explosions. The first shuttle arrived perfectly on time, took half of us civilians away in one trip. I was slotted for the second ship, and I did not mind at all. It was a choice, to allow Hans's mother to go ahead of me in honor of her son's sacrifice. But she had also refused, giving it to one of the younger students, a Solarian girl with red-rimmed glasses. The battle raged on easily into midday, the amount of voices shouting back on the radio ever lessening. Some even cut out with insectoid shrieks or explosions. I began to notice a change in the man known as General Krieg. There was a franticness to which he checked his watch and shouted orders, looking back at us for moments at a time in silence, before shouting something in an old Earth language. "Haltet distelung, es sind wir oder se." It was strange the way he glanced around when he said it, always looking at me or another student for the second half of the shout. I suddenly began to worry, especially as the shuttle hadn't returned yet. Had it been delayed? The sounds of gunfire and screaming men grew closer. Many were cut short by the defiant roar of a death sphere. General Krieg grew even more frantic in his orders, calling in support from the ships above that never arrived. Hours passed, and a palpable fear began to fall over the courtyard. Was this it? Is this how we would die? I heard the word mutiny over the radio, and General Krieg's shoulders fell. He seemed to break for a moment, before looking at those gathered. Then, finally, he picked up the receiver, looking at his radio man with a nod. The radio man nodded solemnly and retrieved a metal suitcase from the bottom of his pack. Saying a few short words in that old tongue, he turned and faced us as his radio man opened up the suitcase with a thumbprint. Typing in a few codes, a big red button rose from the center of the device as the big blocky letters spelled out "armed" on its screen. General Krieg took a suitcase from the radio man and slowly marched over to me. I took the suitcase in bewildered surprise. General Krieg looked at me with a stern but trusting look. "There was a mutiny aboard the HFY Feck. They sabotaged the evacuation pods, and even though they quelled the mutiny, the pods are still going to need roughly an hour to be repaired." Krieg snapped a sharp salute as he informed me. "The Spartan will launch every nuclear silo on this rock and scorch the earth. He will kill all the carnage on this planet. But they will also kill this planet. As a soldier, I cannot make that call. I cannot choose to take all of you out with us to take out the carnage. We don't have an hour to wait for the shuttles to be repaired." General Krieg dropped the salute and set a hand on my shoulder, face softening. "But if we fight hard enough, you will. So I'm giving you an order, soldier. Once you're on the WSF, you are going to press that button and be a hero." I was shocked, but General Krieg didn't give me time to protest as he marched over to his radio man and shouted 3 words. "Hold the line!" For a split second, I saw a figure standing next to the human general, a massive red-skinned rabbit in worn armor, proudly, if sadly, set their hand on General Krieg's shoulder. I blinked, and they were gone. But the sound of battle renewed, the gunfire multiplying in intensity, as something was heard, even louder than the roar of gunfire and explosions. Heard even over the great distances. "Hold the line!" Then, louder, "Hold the line!" And then, like the roar of a cornered beast, it rose from all around us. "Hold the line!" Hundreds, if not thousands of voices crying out the same words in unison. The cataclysmic roar of gunfire was a symphony to their song as General Krieg moved his men into a defensive formation around us. But even as the cry had swelled, it began to fade. Voices and guns fell silent. The sound of chittering and screeching bugs finally reached our ears as we heard the front of the building crash inward. General Krieg dropped his radio and hung his head for a moment. I held the suitcase in my hands like a leaden weight as I watched him shoulder his M40 carbine and pointed at the doors. Then I heard the gracious rumble from on high and looked up. General Krieg did the same, a soft, relieved smile on his face, and a chuckle burst from his chest. The shuttle alighted on the pad less than a minute later, just as the heavy doors began to pound and shake. General Krieg turned and saluted just as the doors burst open and a swarm of carnets flowed towards them. He turned back around and let out a manic roar of laughter. "Show 'em what you're made of, boys!" The sound of gunfire was deafening in the walled courtyard as the tide of insectoids was physically pushed back by the hail of lead the human warriors unleashed. Working in two-man teams, the stream of fire was never ending. When one ran out, they crouched down, allowing the man behind them to fire while they reloaded. The bodies of the armored bugs piled high as I finally loaded onto the shuttle next to Hans's mom. The old woman stoically held back tears as the shuttle door closed behind us. I couldn't bring myself to look through the porthole as we lifted off into the sky. In less than 10 minutes, we were on the WSF. An officer brought me to the bridge, where the captain was still talking with General Krieg somehow, but in a low, subdued tone. "Is my new recruit there yet, Adams?" The captain looked at me and gestured for me to speak. I'm here, sir." There was a happy chuckle from the man, though it was raspy and quickly developed into a cough. "Guess these bugs are smarter than we thought. By the time they got to me, they must have realized that we weren't meant to survive. They're tearing the place up right now." I was frozen with fear and awe of the man, about to ask for instructions when he answered my unasked questions. "Don't even think about asking if I need a shuttle, kid. I got some rebar sticking through my chest right now, and the stars have never been brighter." He trailed off into a chuckle before smacking his lips and softly sighed. "You have your orders, kid. Be a hero." He sounded excited as he said the words, and then there was a sound of wet crunching as the line died. I looked up at everyone, and they looked back. Then I gazed out at the pale blue marble, darkened by the moon. And, with a heavy heart, I pushed the button, understanding now that humanity's fall would not be with a whimper or a bang, but with a bloody smile and the last laugh. General Krieg's soul sat atop the roof of Harvard University, staring at the sky with his men as new stars rose into the sky on trails of smoke, clinking the brown bottle in his hand against the one in the hand of the being next to him. He sighed happily. "Did we do well, boss?" War gazed up at the failing missiles with pride. "You did more than well. Your father awaits you with open arms and tear-filled eyes." General Krieg nodded contently. "Kind of sad to see the old rock go like this," he mused as the missiles fell ever closer. But then the two chuckled as the first new suns lit up the night sky. "But like her people, she'd rather die than live the life of a slave." The heat and pressure washed over the souls, turning the carnets and building around them to ash, but leaving them untouched. And When the dust had settled, there their father stood, a young man, eyes wet with tears as he held out a hand. "Come, we have a long journey ahead of us, and we have a lot to catch up on." General Krieg smiled and let death haul him to his incorporeal feet. End of story. I would just quickly like to thank the T5 peeps: Dragon Soup, Cold War Boomerwaffen, Severin Cerberus, Red Panda 121, Leslie 517, Bushmaster 177, Caspar Arnholtz, Cam Maxwell, Sans the Skeleton, Lightjock, Dragzoon WRE, and Lord Azrakal. Thank you very much.